Mona had memories, too many memories, a whole cacophony of them, that in that carny way she did her best to forget. At times she felt like the keeper of a whole genealogy of memories stretching back to the land of spices itself. But that was impossible, because Mona herself had been snatched, at a time when snatching was not yet an issue, when children were so plentiful they were given away. Could she remember Keam strands, 17 of them packed into the limestone hovel with a straw roof? Hardly. All she could remember was the feeling of loss when the caravan packed and trundled on its journey to God knows where, and the feeling of relief, of pure unadulterated joy, when a shawl wrapped round her and when the dark hands lifted her into their painted, shuttered carts. And that joy became confused over her subsequent carny decades with the original memories of the land of spices. A girl, wrapped in a cocoon of dreams, rocked backwards and forwards by the carnival horses. But, like most carnies, she did her best to keep her memory at bay. Memory was treacherous, it was a shapeshifter, and to be entertained by it would be to admit that she herself had lived so long, and to admit in turn the fatigue, which as a carny it was her duty to keep at bay. But she could never forget that first crossing. The hunger had scattered the carnies like chaff, although they weren't called carnies then. It had scattered the people too into ditches and byways until those that didn't die in bogs with the paste of green grass on their mouths, or get work on the mehel, creating roads that went nowhere through the self-same bog, crowded onto the coffin ships. They brought with them their pitiful rags, their starving bairns and their native beliefs, which they clung to like sacred talismans, so the carnies naturally clung to them. It was a strange kind of clinging. There were no eggs to be despoiled, no milk to be soured, nothing of the land they had left but the fevered imagination of their hosts. So they survived, barely, kept alive by the Bible of superstition they had brought to the unbelieving shore. Mona's coffin ship lived up to its name. It literally became that, a coffin. After the deck hands that consigned the skeletal body through the waves came down with scurvy, dysentery, a whole host of diseases she had known in earlier times simply as the flux. So it was a lifeless ship that drifted into New Haven harbour in late September of the year of our Lord 1847. The ship was isolated, quarantined, and Mona slipped ashore before it was scuttled and its melancholy load consigned to the deep. She found herself wandering those cold New Haven streets among wave after wave of immigrants, from corners of the world she had barely known existed. But they all had one thing in common. They abandoned the old and embraced what they thought was the new. She could have died from lack of belief, the absence of a superstitious cloak to cloak herself in, but, like those new-minted humans, she found new ways to survive. A stint in a vaudeville theatre, where she had to keep her airborne possibilities in check. Several long winters in an uptown brothel until, like most of her kind, she found her most comfortable hiding place in a travelling sideshow. She endured the gaze of random city folk, looking for freaks and wonders. She befriended gigantic furred ladies, perfect miniature families, and when the travel west became inevitable, the sideshow travelled too, among that vast movement of humanity. There was always the need, she found, for a pirouette, a cartwheel, a backflip on the windy corner of whatever half-built western town. San Francisco, when she reached it, was in one of its boom town phases, and she spent most of that boom in a mirrored honky-tonk as the city around it grew, sucking in money like yeast. She tired of the tinkling piano and the clutching hands and the clanging cash register and drifted southwards, telling fortunes in a carnival booth, into which one day walked Virginie. Something about the voice in the darkness made her own spine tingle, told her she had met another of her own. But she couldn't be sure, so she rattled through the normal rigmarole. A man was waiting, a child would come, when the question seemed to leap out of her painted lips. Why have your future told when you know it already? What do I know? The breathy voice asked back, and Mona elaborated. You know already what I'll tell you. Time goes on, the years pass, but for you, nothing changes. And Mona felt her own palm turn to the darkened booth, and heard the voice she would come to treasure tell her, I could say the same for you. Don't cross my hand with silver then, buy me a drink. So they repaired to the one bar and the one-horse town in the corn-filled wilderness that would someday be a dust bowl. They drank sharp rye whiskey, two young women who drew glances but knew well how to buffer them. Two carnies with silk stockings, blocked heels, and coloured skirts that revealed too much of their always adolescent legs.